Good morning, students. First, I'd like to welcome you all to this new session 2021, and let's hope this year is going to be a very good year for us. Now, for your history, I have already sent you the syllabus. Okay, again, I have sent you the syllabus for the year 2021. What we are going to do this year, I have sent you the syllabus. Please go through this syllabus. Okay, and the chapter which we are going to do today is we are starting with the first chapter, Indian history, which is towards independence. This is the first chapter towards independence and partition, the last phase from 1935 to 1947. Okay, so again here, from the first chapter, the first topic is growth of socialist idea. We will not be doing this. Okay, so this topic we are leaving it out. We are not doing this topic. We'll start with the second topic, which is 1935 Act and the working of the provincial autonomy. The Act of 1935, Indian Act 1935 and provincial autonomy. So we will start with this topic today. So I know you all don't have your books now, but I want you all to just pay attention and listen carefully. I'll be sending you notes on whatever we do in the class. So the third roundtable conference, it met at London in November 1932. So in class 11, we did about the first and the second roundtable conference, which became a failure again. Okay, so because the Congress, they demanded for Purna Swaraj, and in the second roundtable conference, this Purna Swaraj was not granted to the Congress. Okay, so now in the third roundtable conference, which was held at London in 1932, the Congress, they did not participate, or they did not, the representatives of the Congress, they did not take part in this conference. So this third roundtable conference, it took place in London 1932 without the representatives of the National Congress, but there were other political parties like the League, Muslim League, the Hindu Mahasabha, the Harijans, the backward class, okay, the liberals, the other parties, the other political parties, they went to London to attend this conference, but Congress, okay, they did not take part in this conference because they were not happy with the second roundtable conference. And what was decided? It was decided that, so the British government, they decided to pass the Government of India Act 1935. So Government of India Act 1935 was passed in the third roundtable conference. Now what was this act? This act established Federation of India. So Federation of India, so by the term federation, it means more than one form of government. So you have a unitary form of government, federal form of government. Unitary is just one government, where federal, more than one form of government. So now in India, there were two forms of government. One was made of British Indian provinces and the other was the Indian states. So now there were two forms of government. So the first one was British India, and the other was native states. Okay, native states. Okay, now there were two forms of government. One was under the British directly, British government or British states. Then the other was the Indian states or native states, which was under the Indian rulers, and provided for autonomy. Autonomy is self-rule with the government, that is the British government. Again here the British government were responsible to the elected legislature in each and every provinces. Okay, so the British government in each and every provinces. Okay, now who was responsible? The British government was responsible. In provinces, now in each and every provinces, the ministers, they would control the department and would remain responsible to the legislature. So in each and every department, in each and every provinces, there were several departments, okay, like defense, health, railway, this finance, this kind of communication. So in each and every provinces, there were several departments, and this department were looked after by the ministers. The governors were given special executive power. So governors, they had the executive power to execute the law, to put an effect to the law. So the governors, they had this power. and they would which they could exercise before assenting to the bills. Bills assenting means before approving the bill. The governors were to be aided. So governors, who helped the governors? It was the ministers. Okay, the Council of Ministers aided the governor and advised the governors. So who used to give advice and help to the governors were the Council of Ministers. The ministers were to be appointed and dismissed by them in their discretion. That means this Council of Ministers, who had the power to appoint and dismiss them? It was the governors. So the member of the Provincial Legislative Assembly. Now the members of this Provincial Legislative Assembly, there were several provinces, and the members of this provinces, the members of this Provincial Legislative Assembly were to be elected directly by the people. So directly the people elected the members of the Legislative Assembly. The franchise was based, that is the voting right. It was based on property qualification, that is certain, let's say a group of people who had property, higher class people, upper class people, only those people, they had the right to vote. And separate electorate and a system of weightage were retained. Okay, so retainment, it was held back. So there was no separate electorate. Okay, and the system of weightage, separate electorate, it was retained, it was not there, it was held back. Now this was the provincial government. Okay, so again in the provincial government, now when there was a third roundtable conference, the Congress did not take part, but the other political parties in India, the representatives of the other political parties, they went to London for this third roundtable conference, and the British government passed this 1935 Act. According to this act, a Federation of India was established, where now India had two forms of government. One was British India and provinces and the native states. So British India was totally under the British and native states were under the rulers. And now again here the ministers in the provinces, the ministers controls all the department, and the governors, they had the executive power. So these governors were helped by the Council of Ministers. The Council of Ministers were they were elected, or let's say they were chosen, appointed and dismissed by the governors, and the member of the Provincial Legislative Assembly were directly elected by the people. And this voting, again, it was not general voting, but only those property class people, okay, they had the right to vote. This was the provincial part. Now in the federal part, the Federal Structure of the Government of India Act was composed with Governor General. In the federal also there were Governor General and Council of Ministers. And the federal legislature had two houses, bicameral, two houses, Council of States. Okay, so in the federal part, again, in the federal part was also looked after by the Governor General and the Council of Ministers. So the house was bicameral. One is Council of States and the House of Assembly. House of Assembly. Okay, Council of States and the House of Assembly. So this Council of State, it was under the Indian rulers, and House of Assembly was under the British government. The ministers were to be chosen by the Governor General. Again, ministers were chosen by the Governor General, and in the Council of States, the representatives of the native states were to be appointed by the rulers. So here the members of this Council of States were elected by the rulers, and the members, the ministers of this House of Assembly were appointed by the governor, British governor. Now the Department of Foreign Affairs, Defence, all this important department were under the Governor General, and in this way diarchy, two forms of government was formed. Okay, two forms of government. This act was refused. Now this way diarchy means two forms of government was introduced at the center, but this act was rejected by the princes, that is the rulers of the native states, the Congress and the Muslim League. They did not like this federal part. This part was rejected by the rulers of the native states. It was rejected by the Congress and the Muslim League. And now the Muslim League, they criticized, but they wanted to give a try. But Congress condemned this act, but they wanted to try the provincial part. So we did two parts, isn't it? First is the provincial part, the first one, and we did the federal structure, where federal structure had bicameral houses, Council of States, House of Assembly. So Congress, they wanted to try the provincial part, okay, the provincial part which we did in the beginning. And both the Congress and the Muslim League, they wanted to take part in this election of 1937. Now 1937 election, 1937, okay, yeah, both the Congress and the Muslim League, they decided to take part in this election. So the federal part, okay, this federal part was never introduced, but they wanted to give a try to the provincial structure. Now in this act of 1937, what happened? The Congress, they won the election out of 11 provinces. They won out of 11 provinces. Congress, they won in 7 provinces. Okay, so they won the majority seats in different provinces. And the performance of the Muslim League was very, very bad compared to the Congress. Now the Congress, they formed ministry in 7 provinces out of 11 provinces, and a coalition government was also formed in 2 provinces. Only Bengal and Punjab had non-Congress ministry. Okay, so only Bengal and Punjab had non-Congress ministry. Okay, so this was about the provincial and the federal structure and the election of 1937. Now moving on to the next, what we have is the activities, the working of the Congress ministry. So the working of the Congress ministry, so after the Congress, they won the election. So what were the activities taken by the Congress? The Congress, they now released all the political prisoners, and there were many prisoners around. There were 1100 prisoners who were released from Bengal. In UP also many prisoners were released. Those Kakuri prisoners, those who were involved in the revolution. Yeah, Kakuri prisoners means those who were involved in the revolution. Okay, so these prisoners were also released from jail. Now the Congress also, they worked to remove the restriction on the political exile, so political exile means like leaders like Raj Bihari Bose, Prithvi Singh, Maulvi Abdullah Khan. Okay, so there were many great leaders who were deported to other jails. So the Congress tried to release those leaders also, but they could not do much to those political prisoners who were sent to Andaman and Nicobar jail. Okay, because there was an order from the central government, especially for those who were in Andaman and Nicobar jail, the prisoners who were imprisoned, they were imprisoned in Andaman and Nicobar jail, and this was an order which was given by the central government. So that's why the Congress could not do much for them, but the other political prisoners were released. Again, suspension order of the political parties and similar organization were revoked. The press also had the right to criticize freely. The Congress ministry in Madras also, they cancelled the pending loans, okay, which were taken by the peasants from the government. So those loans which were taken by the peasants, these loans were also cancelled. And in Bombay also, the ministry passed 1938 Industrial Dispute Act, and the wages of mill hands were increased. So those workers who were working in mills, who were working in factories, their wages were also increased. And license for selling intoxicating drugs, okay, like alcohol, intoxicating drugs were not allowed. It was restricted. They did not give any license. The peasants' problem was the burning issue. Now the peasants, okay, the burning issue was the problem of the peasants, the farmers. So now the Congress ministry, they generated hope among the peasants, and also the tenancy legislation was taken up in all Congress ruled provinces. That means the Congress now, they wanted to work because half of the population were peasants. So now the Congress wanted to work for the betterment of the Congress. The Congress wanted to work for the welfare of the peasants. And everywhere there were efforts made to protect the peasants from the clutches of the moneylenders, and irrigational facilities were also increased. So especially the peasants were totally dominated, and they were under the domination and the clutches of the zamindars and moneylenders. So now the Congress wanted to help the peasants from the clutches of the moneylenders and zamindars, and irrigation facilities were also introduced. Okay, so this way Congress every time stood behind the peasants. Okay, and the other important topic here is, if you go to this assessment of the activities of the Congress. Okay, first we did about the provincial autonomy. Okay, the third roundtable conference, starting from there, the federal structure, the election of 1937. Just now we did the working of the Congress, and this assessment of the activities of the Congress. This is also important from here. What you have to know is just now the Congress ministry, why the Congress ministry resigned in 1939. The election was held in 1937, but after 2 years, 1939, why the Congress resigned? The Congress ministry resigned in November 1939 on the war issue, because 1939 the Second World War had started. And the Congress, now what they believed was that the Viceroy had involved India in the Second World War without consulting the central legislature and the provincial government. Okay, so why the Congress resigned just after 2 years? Because when the Second World War was going on, the Viceroy involved Indians in the Second World War without consulting the central legislature and the provincial government. So that's the reason why the Congress leaders were not happy with the British government, and they resigned in 1939. Okay, so this is very important, because this question, why the Congress ministry resigned in 1939, this question has been repeated many times for your short type questions. Okay, and also provincial autonomy, the first topic which we did, provincial autonomy, is also very, very important, the working of the provincial autonomy. So I'm going to stop here. Next class I'll start with another topic, but I wanted to just I'll be sending you notes. Okay, today I'll be sending you notes on whatever we did today, so don't worry if you don't have your books. I'll be sending you notes. Please go through those notes. Okay, thank you.